In the autumn of 1944, somewhere in the broken hedgerow country of northern France, a German officer walks slowly around the hull of a destroyed American tank. The Sherman is dead. One track has been blown off the road wheels and lies unspooled in the mud like a snake. There is a black scar where a shell punched through the side armor, and the smell of burnt rubber and oil still hangs in the cold air. He has seen dozens of these machines knocked out. He is not interested in the gun or the armor or the white star painted on the side. He is interested in something bolted to the rear of the tank that he cannot explain. It is a small steel box, painted the same olive drab as the rest of the hull, welded to the back plate just above the exhaust. The lid has been torn half open by the blast. Inside, swinging on a frayed cord, is a telephone handset. An ordinary field telephone, the kind a man would use in a command post miles behind the line. And it is fixed to the outside of a tank, where a soldier could pick it up while standing in the open in the middle of a battle. To the German officer, this makes no sense. Why would the Americans put a telephone on the most exposed part of a fighting vehicle? Why would a man ever stand behind a tank in the killing zone to make a phone call? He does not understand yet that he is looking at one of the quiet reasons his army is losing. To understand why that little steel box mattered, you have to go back a few months, to the summer, and to a problem that was killing tanks and infantry alike. When the Allies broke out of the Normandy beaches, they ran straight into the Bocage. Centuries of farmers had divided the land into tiny fields, each one walled off by a thick bank of earth and roots, topped with dense hedges. From the air it looked like a green checkerboard. On the ground it was a maze, and every hedgerow was a natural fortress. A handful of German soldiers with a machine gun and an anti-tank weapon could hold a single field for hours. The American answer was supposed to be simple: send the tanks forward to blast the hedgerows and send the infantry alongside to protect the tanks from the German tank hunting teams. Armor and infantry working together, covering each other's weaknesses. On paper it was perfect. In practice it kept falling apart, and it fell apart for a reason that sounds almost too small to matter. The tankers and the foot soldiers could not talk to each other. Picture it. The tank is buttoned up, hatches closed, because opening a hatch in that country means a sniper's bullet or a grenade. Inside, the crew is half blind, peering through narrow vision slits and periscopes, the engine roaring, the radio filled with the voices of other tanks. Outside in the dirt, the infantry can see exactly where the danger is. They can see the German machine gun in the corner of the field. They can see the man with the anti-tank rocket crawling along the far hedge. But they have no way to tell the tank. So they improvised, and the improvising got men killed. A soldier would run up behind the tank, climb onto the back deck under fire, and pound on the hatch with his fist or his rifle butt, trying to get the commander's attention over the noise of the engine. He would stand there, fully exposed, on top of a vehicle that every German gun in the area was trying to destroy, screaming and banging on steel. Some of them were shot off the tank before they could say a word. Others tried to run up to the front and point, waving their arms toward the threat, hoping the driver could see them through his slit. It almost never worked. The result was tanks rolling forward blind, straight into ambushes the infantry could see coming, and infantry watching their armor support get destroyed because they had no way to shout a warning that would actually be heard. This is the gap the Germans never closed. The German army had excellent radios, some of the best in the world, and their tanks and command posts were well connected to each other. But they had no simple, reliable way for an ordinary rifleman walking next to a tank to speak directly to the crew inside it. Their doctrine assumed the tank commander would ride with his head out of the hatch, watching and shouting. That worked in the open spaces of Russia and the desert. It did not work in country where sticking your head out meant dying. The American fix did not come from a laboratory or a famous general. It came from the field, from mechanics and tank crews and engineers who were tired of watching the same thing happen over and over. The idea was almost insultingly simple. Take a standard field telephone, the rugged, reliable kind the Army already had by the hundreds of thousands. Wire it into the tank's own internal communication system, the intercom the crew used to talk to each other. Put the telephone in a small armored box and bolt that box to the rear of the tank, down low, where a man could crouch behind the protection of the hull and still reach it. Now the picture changes completely. The infantryman no longer has to climb on top of the tank. He no longer has to bang on the hatch or wave his arms in front of the driver. He drops down behind the tank in its shadow, shielded from most of the enemy fire by tons of steel between him and the guns. He lifts the handset, and he is talking directly into the ears of the crew inside, as clearly as if he were sitting in the turret with them. Machine gun, 2 o'clock, corner of the next field, behind the stone wall. The turret swings. The gun speaks. The problem is gone. Multiply that single phone call by every tank and every squad across an entire front, and you begin to see the scale of what changed. Take a typical morning in that autumn campaign. A platoon of infantry edges up a sunken lane with a pair of Shermans behind them. A hidden German gun opens up from a farmhouse, and a machine gun starts raking the lane from a hedge. In the summer, this was the moment men died by the dozen, the tanks blind and the infantry pinned with nothing to do but bleed. Now a sergeant rolls into the ditch behind the lead tank, grabs the handset, and in 10 seconds the tank knows there is a gun in the farmhouse and a machine gun in the hedge to the left. The first high-explosive round goes straight through the farmhouse wall. The turret swings, and the hedge position is hosed down with the machine gun mounted beside the cannon. The lane is open. Nobody had to climb onto the tank. Nobody had to die to deliver the message. It is hard to overstate what this did. Suddenly, the eyes of the infantry and the firepower of the tank were joined into one system. The men on foot became the tank's vision in the places it could not see. The tank became the infantry's sledgehammer against the strong points they could not break alone. A German position that might have cost a platoon an entire morning, and several tanks could now be spotted, reported, and destroyed in minutes, with the infantry directing fire from cover the whole time. And here is the part the German officer standing by the wrecked Sherman could not grasp. The phone was not exposed because the Americans were careless. It was low, and to the rear, precisely so the man using it would be protected. What looked like a foolish vulnerability was actually a carefully thought-out solution. The telephone on the back of the tank was not a weakness. It was teamwork turned into a piece of equipment. As these phones spread through the American armored and infantry divisions in late 1944, the effect rippled across every battlefield. Tank and infantry coordination, the thing that had been so painful and so deadly in the hedgerows, became smooth and fast. Towns were cleared more efficiently. Bunkers and gun positions were reduced with fewer casualties. The cost of cracking a German defensive line, measured in burning tanks and dead riflemen, began to drop. The American Ordnance Branch saw how well the field improvisation worked and moved to make it standard, sending out kits and instructions so the telephone and its armored box could be fitted to Shermans across the tank battalions. What had started as a fix welded together by frustrated crews in Normandy became, within months, a recognized part of how American armor fought. That speed of adoption was itself a kind of weapon. An idea proven in one division could be spreading through a dozen others before the enemy even understood that it existed. The Germans noticed the results without ever fully understanding the cause. They saw American attacks that seemed unnervingly well coordinated, armor and infantry moving like parts of the same body, threats answered almost as soon as they appeared. They attributed it to American material wealth, to endless tanks and endless shells. And the wealth was real. But some of it was not wealth at all. Some of it was a $5 telephone in a steel box, and the willingness to listen to the men actually doing the fighting. Compare that with the German side, and the gap becomes a chasm. German armored doctrine leaned heavily on the tank commander, fighting with his head out of the cupola, eyes scanning, shouting orders and hand signals to the infantry around him. It produced superb commanders and, in open country, deadly coordination. But it carried a terrible cost in the close, vicious terrain that dominated the Western campaign. Every commander who rode high to keep that coordination was a target, and the best of them were picked off by snipers and shell fragments. The Germans paid for their teamwork with the lives of exactly the men they could least afford to lose, while the Americans got the same teamwork from a man crouched safely behind the hull with a telephone. There was something almost philosophical buried in that difference, though no one fighting would have put it that way. The German system trusted the man at the top of the turret. The American system, through that little box, trusted the man on the ground in the mud. It said, in effect, you are the one who can see, so you tell the gun where to shoot. It pushed the decision down to the person with the best information, and it protected him while he made it. Armies, like all organizations, reveal their character in small choices like that, and in this small choice, the more flexible army won. Veterans who fought in those tank and infantry teams remembered the phone with a kind of quiet affection. Before it, working with armor felt like trying to steer a blind giant by shouting through a wall. After it, the giant could finally hear them. The tankers, for their part, stopped feeling like they were rolling forward into the unknown, half expecting a hidden gun to gut them at any second. They had eyes outside the steel now, friendly eyes, a calm voice in the headset telling them where the real danger was. The trust ran both ways, and it made both halves of the team far harder to kill. That last part is the real lesson hidden inside this small story. The German army was rigid in a way that ran from the top to the bottom. Solutions were supposed to come down from above, from doctrine, from the staff. The American army, for all its faults, had a habit the Germans never matched. It let good ideas come up from the bottom, from sergeants and mechanics and lieutenants, and when an idea worked, it got copied and spread with astonishing speed. The tank telephone was exactly that kind of idea. Nobody high and mighty invented it. The men who needed it invented it, and the army was flexible enough to listen. So when that German officer turned away from the wrecked Sherman in the cold French mud, still puzzled by the telephone bolted to its back, he was looking at more than a piece of equipment he did not recognize. He was looking at a way of fighting and a way of thinking that his own side could not match. He was looking at an army that trusted the man on the ground enough to put a phone in his hand and let him aim the tank. He did not understand it. By the time anyone on his side might have, the war in the West was already lost. One cleared hedgerow, one silenced machine gun, one quiet phone call at a time. The men who used those telephones rarely thought of them as remarkable. To them it was just a tool, one more thing bolted to the tank, as ordinary as a shovel or a canteen. They could not have known that decades later, historians would point to that little steel box as one of the small, unglamorous reasons the Allied armies ground their way across Europe. There were no medals given for inventing it. There is no monument to it anywhere. There is only the quiet fact that it worked, and that it saved lives, and that the enemy never figured out in time why the Americans and their tanks suddenly seemed to read each other's minds. And that, in the end, is how a great deal of that war was actually won. Not only by the famous battles and the brilliant generals, but by thousands of small, practical fixes dreamed up by ordinary men who simply refused to keep doing things the deadly way. The telephone on the back of the tank was one of them. A handset on a frayed cord swinging in the wind beside a dead engine, telling anyone who understood it the whole story of why one army was winning and the other was running out of time.